All right, Rabbi, say good morning. Good morning. Let us begin. Hopefully, everyone had a beautiful and uplifting Yom Tov and Kabbalah Satorah, and hopefully, again, Meretz Hashem, ready to emerge from Yom Tov, re-energized and recommitted. Baruch Hashem, to our beautiful daf and to each and everything that we do to immerse ourselves in the Ribono Shel Olam's Torah. Begin by thanking our sponsors for this morning's shir. To thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Sivan, Paul and Kathy Pollack, for dedicating all of the Shiur Mendrashos this month. In this Chesed Refuah Shlema for Kathy's sister, Donna Baker Matson, we hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, she together with Kol Choli Yisrael have a complete and enduring Refuah. We also thank Doug and Gail Stenger for dedicating the Day of Learning in honor of their son-in-law Aaron Weinberg's birthday. Mazel Tov. I didn't see Aaron. Okay, good. Wish him a happy birthday when you see him, Meretz Hashem. And today's daf sponsor, Dr. Mark and Elsa Lustman, in the schus of the upcoming marriage tomorrow, Meretz Hashem, of their granddaughter Atara Sobel to Gavriel Sivard in Lakewood, New Jersey, Meretz Hashem. The chuppah should occur b'shah tova mitzlachas, and the young couple should be zocha to build a binyan ad de'ad ad 120 shanim tovos. Beautiful, beautiful. See, Daf Yomi sponsorships are good for all life cycle events. Marriages, birthdays, anniversaries, whatever it is. All right, excellent, Chavra. Let's begin. So today's daf is Yud Beis. We're actually going to pick up. I know Rabbi Richter got to the top of Yud Beis yesterday. Let's actually just go back a little bit to the bottom of Yud Aleph Amud Beis, because it's important that as a shir we are never exactly, running according to schedule. So let's go back just for a little bit. 11b. Let's pick up 6 lines up from the bottom. Just so we're all holding in the same sugya. I'm sorry. 11b. I'm not that far behind. Just 11b, 6 lines up from the bottom. So, okay, so let's go. So, Amar Rav Chisda, Hatofis l'bachol makom shechav l'acherim. So, remember again, the Gemara introduced this fascinating case. It's actually really fascinating. So, imagine the following situation. Ruvain borrowed $10,000 from Shimon. Okay? So, therefore, again, Ruvain owes money to Shimon. So, what happens? I am not involved in this transaction. Right, so I go ahead and I see that the debt has come time for payment, and Ruvain has not yet paid Shimon. So I happen to see a piece of property that Ruvain possesses. So I take possession of that property in an effort to go ahead and pay back Shimon. But let's say at the same time, Ruvain owes other people money as well. So this is a case of Tofes L'Balchov, where ultimately I'm seizing on behalf of a creditor, but ultimately, again, the party from whom I am seizing property owes money to other people. So therefore, on one hand, I'm going ahead and doing something of benefit to Shimon the creditor, but I'm putting other people at a disadvantage. Which essentially, if you distill it down to its core issue is, see, we have two competing concepts introduced by the Mishnah. What are the two competing concepts? Number one, Zachin la'adam shelo b'fanav, which means what? You can do something objectively beneficial for someone without their knowledge, which I will say in halachic terms means what? You could become a self-appointed agent. And I will say this is big stuff. I could essentially create an agency. I could act as an agent on behalf of another person without their ever having appointed me as an agent or without them having any knowledge of my actions when the agency I am performing is objectively beneficial. It's an incredible chiddush. Again, I want to point out, it doesn't just mean you could do something nice for someone without their knowing. I don't need the Gemara telling me that. Of course you can do something nice for someone. It means I could become a self-appointed agent. I can become myself to do something objectively beneficial. The converse is not true. What's the converse? Right? But ein chavin la'adam shelo b'fanav. You can't do something detrimental for someone without their knowledge. I.e., I cannot become a self-appointed agent to execute something on someone's behalf if it's detrimental to them when they don't know. So remember again, let's go. How did the Mishnah illustrate these two concepts? Right? So where's the distinction between these two? Where's the distinction? So ultimately, again, the distinction was, let's say, giving a get, an eved a get shikra. So the Mishnah was assuming for now that that's a zechus. That's a zechus. As opposed to the get for a woman, just the opposite. The get for the woman is the schus. Again, we'll talk about all of this. And the get for the eved may be a chov. So again, the Gemara says, those are the principles. So now, the interesting part we have to deal with is, so what happens in the case where you have both? That's the case of tofes lebalchov b'makom shechav la'achirim. I go ahead and I seize property to go ahead and pay a creditor, but the debtor owed other people money. So in this case, what I did benefited one person, but what? Adversely impacted someone else. We'll say it's a great case, no? It's a great case.
Great.
Thank you. Right, thank you. All right, good. Let's go back to Son of Chisda. So most of the Gemara says, Bono l'machlokes Rabbi Eliezer v'Rabbanon. This is the machlokes Rabbi Eliezer and the Rabbanon. This nan, mi sheliket es hapeya. So we'll say, this is actually a fascinating case. I go ahead and I collect peya. So let's remember again, what's peya? Peya is you go ahead and you leave the corner of your field for the poor. We'll say, by the way, this is actually very, very inyane diyoma, because what do we learn in Megillas Rus? Right, Rus goes to the field to collect all of the different leket, shichacha, peya. So we'll say it's incredible. Isruchag, and we have again a reverence to peya, absolutely beautiful. So what happens? A person goes ahead and comes to collect peya. Va'amar harezu leploni ani. I'll say, watch this. This is so great. I go into a field, right? Baruch Hashem, I don't need peya, but I go ahead and I lift up the peya and I say, this is for Ruvain. My neighbor Ruvain is an ani. He's a pauper. So I go ahead and I lift up the peya, having in mind to acquire it for him. So we'll say, so now again, is it a schus or is it a chov? What would you say? Is it a schus or a chov? Right? Schus. Schus for who? For Ruvain. Chov for who? Every other ani. Let's remember again, by me acquiring this peya for one ani, I've effectively deprived all of the other aniyin. Remember, peya is hefker, but it's only hefker for aniyin. Right? So now every single ani has that same level of entitlement in that peya. So I'll say, isn't this incredible? So the Gemara says, this is the case of hatofes lebalchov v'chav la'achirim. I'm doing something beneficial for one party, but what's beneficial for Ruvain is detrimental for every other ani. So can you do this? Rabbi Eliezer Omer Zachalo. Rabbi Eliezer says, yeah, it works. The Chacham say no. Yitnana la'ani animtza rishon. The Chacham say no, you can't do that. Rather, what do you have to do with the peah? You have to give it to the first ani you meet. In other words, you cannot, they both say the way these matnos aniyim work is everyone has equal share. You can't save, right? You can't save for people. You can't put aside for certain people. So therefore, again, even though I lifted it up for the express intent, with the express intent of giving it to Ruvain, I have to give it to the first pauper I encounter. Shavuot says, the Gemara says, so the Gemara is assuming over here, this is the same machlokes. This machlokes by peya is essentially the same machlokes of tofes lebalchov b'makom shechav la'achim. It's the same thing. I'm seizing property from a debtor to repay a creditor, but that debtor also owes other people money. So whereas I'm doing something beneficial for one creditor, I'm adversely impacting a whole bunch of others. So the Gemara says, it's the same machlokes by peya and tofes balchov. To which Gemara says, 1 second. But not necessarily. The cases don't necessarily align. We'll say top of your base. Ad come Rabbi Eliezer Hassam. So Rabbi Eliezer says in this case, in peya case, that I could acquire the peya on behalf of Ruvain, my neighbor, the ani, or Ruvain, the ani, who is my neighbor. Right? Why does Rabbi Eliezer say that? We'll say this is fascinating. Hassam ela demigo di by mafkele lenechasi v'havi ani the chazile. We'll say this is incredible. There's an interesting loophole that one could employ technically to acquire peya. We'll say, so let's say I have money. And now I want to figure out a way to acquire peya. How can you? We'll say there is a way to do it. How do you do it? If you make all of your property hefker. So a person makes all of his possessions hefker, immediately becomes a nani. Right? Suddenly you have nothing. Technically speaking, if you have nothing, then you are entitled to go ahead and take peya. So Rabbi Eliezer says like this: since technically speaking, I can make all of my property hefker and therefore acquire the peya on my own behalf, migo dechazile nafshe zaki lechavre. The same way I could technically acquire peya on my own behalf, right, or for myself, I could also acquire peya for someone else. So Rabbi Eliezer says the only reason it works for peya is because peya has this unique peculiarity that since technically there is a way for me to acquire peya for myself, therefore I have the right to acquire the peya for another ani as well. Aval hacha, but in the case of tofes lebalchov, lo. Everyone, even Rabbi Eliezer would agree it doesn't work. Furthermore, Va'ad kamo ka'amri rabbanon hasam ela dichsiv lo silaket la'ani. We'll say the pasuk says, and then actually the pasuk reads, the pasuk says, lo silaket. So we'll say, this is fascinating. Everything is where you put the kamo. So the pasuk over is talking about the mitzvah of leket shechacha, or actually pay, I should say. So the Torah says, when you harvest your field, leave a corner unharvested, right? V'leket kitzircha lo silaket, la'ani v'lager tazov osam. So we'll say, the way the pasuk actually reads is, don't harvest it, leave it for the poor. We'll say, listen to this. The way the Rabbanan read the pasuk is, lo silaket la'ani. Don't harvest it for the ani. Torah is telling me, you're not allowed to go ahead and take that on behalf of the ani. If the ani wants it, the ani has to come for himself. But there's no such thing as people taking it on behalf of aniyim. Lo silaket, lo la'ani. Don't take it for the ani. We'll say, which, by the way, if you think about it, well, actually, we'll get to interesting. About halcha, but in the case of tofes, balabal maybe not. So therefore, again, the Gemara just points out, halacha l'maisa, the two cases don't align. Rabbi Eliezer, hi lo salakit my avidle. What does Rabbi Eliezer do with the phrase lo salakit? So lahasir lo ani al shelo. He uses it to teach me that halacha l'maisa will say an ani is obligated to go ahead and bring payah from his own field as well. That if an ani has a field, halacha l'maisa, he has to bring payah as well from his field. So also, I'll just point out something very interesting. The Rambam paskins halacha l'maisa like the chachamim. You can't take payah on behalf of another ani. Right? In other words, you can't do that. You can't, in other words, I, as a person who has money, who doesn't need pay, I can't go ahead, or even if I'm another ani, I can't take payah or leket or shechacha on behalf of another person. Also, it has to be that way. Why does it have to be that way? Because if you could save payah for an ani, then what would that do? It totally undermines the system. Because you always say, what is every single person going to do in their field? I have a field. Right? Baruch Hashem, I'm not an ani. Baruch Hashem. So what happens? I have payah. But say, what am I going to do as soon as I leave that field? Everyone knows aniyim. And often, again, even in one's family, one has aniyim. So what is every single field owner going to do? What is he going to do? He's going to allocate his payah to who he wants. And I will say that fundamentally undermines the system. The whole chap of the system is what? That all of the aniyim have equal access, have equal opportunity to these particular tithes for the poor. So Rabbi say, we paskin like the chachamim, that you are not allowed to save or to allocate leket, shechacha, and payah towards any particular ani. And if you do so, right, what do you have to do? You have to give it up to the first ani you find, to the first ani you meet. Now I will say, the one piece that we don't have, this also, fine. So the case of Tofis L'Bachal Makom Shechav L'Achirim, but say we also paskin that if you seize property in order to satisfy, let's say again, so Reuven, right? Reuven borrowed money from Shimon. So now again, I seize property from Reuven in order to repay Shimon. But Reuven also happens to owe other people money. So such a tfisa, seizure. Thank you. Such a seizure does not work in halacha. You're not allowed to do that. You can't do something that is going to go ahead and positively impact one person with a detrimental effect on others, which I will say is such a musar haskil as well, because sometimes in life, we don't realize this, but in the effort to do something good for someone, so often what happens, not often, but sometimes it can happen that what is good for one party often creates an adverse impact for others. And this is important, I will say, that when it comes to chesed, when it comes to doing good things for others, just like we say, it's not just what you do, but it's how you do it. It's not just what you do, and it's not just how you do it. It's also taking into account who your good deeds are going to impact and how they're going to impact them. So often, like in the rush to go ahead and do something good, we don't necessarily contemplate the collateral effects of our actions. That's what I was saying, because you think about it, that's the case of Tofes Lebalchov b'makom shechav la'achirim. Right? What's happening over here? I'm trying to do so. I'm trying to help. Who am I trying to help? I'm trying to help Shimon, the creditor. I will say, in my effort to go ahead and help Shimon, what have I done? I've adversely impacted, Levi and Yehuda, who are also owed money by Ruvain. And I will say, that's the halacha is trying to sensitize us to. When you do something good for someone else, beautiful, ashrecha, but contemplate the impact of your good actions on other people. Well, this comes up all the time in family life. It comes up all of the time, right? You want to go ahead and give attention or help or do something nice for a family member. A person has to contemplate just the impact of that and the ripple effect of that on the rest of the family unit as well. When doing chesed, when performing acts of kindness, it's not just what you do, it's not just how you do it, but it's contemplating who it will have an effect upon. Incredible. Let's go back there. Says the Gemara, in Yirtzeh Shalom Lozon. So we'll say, remember again, the Mishnah explained that halacha l'maisa, where was it? Right, so we said before that technically speaking, if the adon, right, if the master doesn't want to sustain his eved, doesn't want to provide mazonos for his eved, he has the ability to do so. So the Gemara says, Shamis Mina, what do you see from here? Yochel harav lomer li eved aseimi ve'eni zancha. So we'll say this is incredible. What do you see from here? That a master has the ability to say to his eved, we'll say this is an eved kinani. Right, eved kinani. Person has the ability to say to his eved kinani, work for me, but I'm not supporting you. I'm not supporting. Now, we'll say it sounds totally counterintuitive. How can you say to your eved, how can you be obligated to work and I have no obligation of support? I will say, remember again, what is an eved kinani? An eved kinani is property. Is property. So as property, technically speaking, a master could say to him, you have to work, but I'm not giving you any food. You go ahead and you figure it out. Now we're going to see if halacha mais how we paskin. So the Gemara says, no, what's the case? No, what's the case? The case is where the master says to the servant, listen, I'm not supporting you, but you could keep your earnings. Right? Whatever money you earn, right? Whatever money you pick up, whatever mitzias you find, those are yours and use those towards your support. To which the Gemara says, the parallel case would be by a woman, right? Ultimately, again, a husband could say to us, remember again, we'll get into this more in Maseches Kiddushin, but because the husband provides his wife with mizonos, with sustenance, therefore, again, Chazal enacted that her earnings come to him. But he could say to her, listen, I'm not going to support you, and you keep your earnings. Right? Isha amaylo. Why wouldn't this parallel case work by an Isha, by a wife? Isha b'delo sapka. Because it could be the case by the wife ultimately is where she doesn't earn enough in order to be able to support herself. I eved nami b'delo safka. So why don't you say the case is by the eved also, where he does not earn enough money to be able to support himself? This is incredible. Avda dinos karsei lo shavyat lemare ulamarte lemay misboy. Let's say an eved who can't generate enough money to fill his own stomach, of what worth is he to his master? Right? As well say, if the eved can't produce enough to be able to support himself, then what is he doing? So Tashma, remember, I want to point out what we're going to be focusing on over here, our entire sugya, pretty much until we get to the end of the daf, is going to be focused on this concept of, does a master have the ability to say to his servant, Asei imi ve'eni zancha? Does a master have the ability to have like this one-sided relationship with his eved, where he says to the eved, you work for me, right? You do what I tell you to do, right? Work for me, but I'm not supporting you. You go figure it out. Is it possible to have this level of one-sided relationship? So the Gemara says, Tashma, Eved was a great case. Eved should go to Arim Miklat. What happens if you have an Eved who was exiled to a city of refuge? We both say, remember, let's just take a step for this moment. An Eved Kanani is property. What's the status of an Eved Kanani? What's his Jewish status? Right? So it's interesting, is like, he's kind of part Jewish. In general, you can't be part Jewish. Right? Either you are Jewish or you're not Jewish. Actually, the exception to this is an Eved Kanani. Because what ends up happening is, when he becomes an Eved, there's a tevila, an immersion, l'shem avdos. There's also actually a mila l'shem avdus. But say at that point in time, he becomes chayiv in mitzvos, but only to the degree of like a woman. Right? Not that he has the status of a woman, but halachically, he's obligated in mitzvos. Like, meaning he's exempt from time mitzvos. That's pretty much what it means. Upon emancipation, ultimately, again, he becomes a full-fledged Jew. So there is this interesting quasi-status of Judaism. So because of that, listen to this. What happens if an Eved Kenani kills someone b'shogeg? Right, he's climbing up a ladder, he falls down the ladder, falls on Ruvain, kills Ruvain. What's the halacha? Ir miklat. Okay, so now you have an Eved Kenani and an Ir miklat. So Eved Shagali, Ir miklat, ein rabba chayv lezono. The master is not obligated to support him. V'lo od, elo shemaisi yadav l'rabbo. Not only that, but anything he earns, right, any work he does, ultimately goes to the master. What do you see from here? What do you see from here? You see from here that Allah a master could say to his Eved Kenani, work for me and I am not supporting you. Work for me and I'm not supporting you. To which the Gemara says, what's the case here? No, the case over here is where the master said to the servant, listen, you keep your earnings, we'll call it a wash, right? You keep your earnings, I'm not going to support you. If that's the case, if that's the case, then why does the Brisa say that when the Eved is in the Ir Miklat, the master gets his earnings? So the Gemara says, La Hadafa. So we'll say Hadafa means excess amount. We'll say there's assumption over here that when a person, there are two levels of support that a person has, right? One is called what he needs for his basic needs. Hadafa is the amount of money he earns above what he needs for his basic needs. So what the Gemara is suggesting is like this. This case of the Eved Kenani is in the Ir Miklat, so the master could say to him, right? The master is not chayiv to support him, and ultimately the earnings go to the master. The Gemara wants to suggest what's the case? Why isn't the master obligated to support him? Because the case over here is where the master said, you keep your earnings, support yourself in the Ir Miklat. If that's the case, then why does the Eved have to give money back to the master? His earnings, to which the Gemara says, that's the Hadafa. Any additional monies that the Eved Kenani generates above what he needs to sustain himself, ultimately that goes to the master. To which the Gemara says, Hadafa, pshita. That's obvious. The Gemara says, I'll tell you why. What would you have thought? So I would have thought like this. I would have thought that halacha l'maisa, since even when the Eved doesn't have food, the master is not obligated to support him. In other words, the master doesn't have an obligation of support for his Eved. Ki islay namilo lishkamine. When the Eved does have it, maybe the master is not entitled to take it. Kamash malo not. Kamash lo no, that I will say that ultimately, again, any excess amounts always become the property of the owner. Umash lo ari miklat. So I will say, so why do you have to set this up as the case where the Eved is going to the Ir Miklat? First white line, v'chai avid lechi yusat. We'll say, when someone is sent to the city of refuge, there's an obligation, the Torah says, v'chai. Make sure that he's sustained. So I might have thought that in this case, sustenance even means giving him a little bit extra. Kamash molono. Kamash molono, that's not the case. So again, just to be clear, we are laser focused on one question and one question only. What's our question?
Can the master sell his slave without supporting him?
Good, excellent. Not right. Could a master not even sell? Could a master engage in a one-sided relationship? Could a master say to his servant, "You work for me, I'm not supporting you"? That's our shaila. We thought we could prove it from this case. Can't prove it from this case. Next, but the end of that same brisa. What was the end of that same brisa? If a wife is exiled to the Ir Miklat, this is an interesting case, right? So Reuven is married to Rachel. Rachel accidentally kills someone. So we'll say, so where does Rachel go? Rachel goes to Ir Miklat. So now Rachel's away for a while. So I'll say, so now what happens? So now, about Isha Shagasla Ari Miklat, Baila Chaim Zonosah. Now we'll say, when we get to Maseches Makkos, so we'll discuss exactly, when a person is sent to the Ir Miklat, who goes with them? Right? Again, we'll get to that, but we're not focused on that right now. So now Rachel is being exiled. Her husband is obligated to go ahead and support her. Michlal de lo amarla. Now, I will say the case must be where he doesn't say to her, "Tzii ma'aseh yadayich v'mzonosayich," right? He's not saying to her, "You keep your earnings and support yourself." Di amar la baila amay chayev. Because remember, if the husband would say that, right? If the husband would say to his wife, "Listen, you're an ir miklat, do me a favor, you keep," right? Let's say she works remotely. So it doesn't matter if she's in the ir miklat or not. So he says to her, "You go ahead and you keep your earnings. You keep your earnings." And so if he said that, it would work. Umid the seifa de lo amrla. Then we'll say if the seifa is where he didn't say it, then reisha nami de lo amrla. Then the case of the eved must be a case where he didn't say it either. So what's going on? The olam de amrle. And the Gemara says, no. The case is where the first case is where the master said to his servant, "You keep your earnings and support yourself." That's why the adon is not chayiv to support him. And when the Mishnah said that the earnings of the eved go to the master, that's talking about hadaf, additional amounts. What's the case of the wife? The isha bidalo safka. Also, the case of the isha where she goes to the ir miklat. Why does the Brisa say that the husband is obligated to support her? Because the case is where what? She does not earn enough for her own support. And we'll say, obviously, if she does not earn enough for her own support, the husband is obligated to make up that shortfall. I will say, ultimately, again, but the Sefer said, if he said to her, "Keep your earnings and support yourself," Rashai, he's able to do that. Michlal dereisha delo amrla. Again, I will say, the inference from that is that in the first case of the Eved, he didn't say this. So Gemara says, "Halachim Razula" means to say, "V'maspekes, v'amar latzima seyadech mzonosayach rashai." So we'll say, if she earns enough money, and he says to her, "You keep your earnings and support yourself," he has the right to say that. So the Gemara says, "Maspekes." If she makes enough money, ma'ila memra. What's the shayla? Of course, he can also say, if a woman makes enough money, of course, a husband can say to her, "Listen, you keep your earnings. I won't have the chiyuv mizonos," and that works. So Maltem, what would you have? That wasn't incredible. Kol kavod the bas melch pnima. We'll say, I might have thought like this. We'll say, actually a beautiful pasuk. Beautiful pasuk in Tehillim. Kol kavuda bas melch pnima. Literally, again, we'll say, all of the kavod of the bas melech, right? The honor of the bas melech is pnima, is on the inside. I will say, now on the most basic level, kol kavuda bas melch pnima means the beauty of the Jewish woman is not contained on the outside, but her true beauty is inner beauty. But Chazal also use this pasuk to kind of create a concept of tznius. And sometimes the concept of tznius is well like this. Kol kavod bas melech pnima means, if you look at Rashi, tznua vein darka latzeis ulasavei bo'ir she'ina misham. So we'll say, now listen to this. I might have thought like this. Let's say she does have a skill. She does have a skill set that could earn her enough money. And I will say, now remember again, where is Rachel, our wife in question, right? Where is she? Where is she now in this case? She's in the ir miklat. So now she has a skill that can earn her enough money. But now she's in a foreign city where no one knows her. She's going to have to kind of like wander around in order to be able to find a job. I might have thought that that's not sanua for her. Right? That's not sanua for her. In other words, it's beneath her dignity to have to do that. So I might have thought that in this case, even though she has a skill set which could earn her enough money, still the husband should be obligated to support her. Kamash Mulan, though. Kamash will say that if she's able to earn enough money on her own, even in the ir miklat, the husband has the ability to say to her, "You keep your earnings, and I won't have an obligation to support." So we'll say, so again, remember, laser focus. We're just trying to figure out, could a master say to his eved, "Asei ini ve'eni zancha"? That's it. Work for me, I'm not supporting this. We'll say, still, we have failed to prove that from this case. Next. Lema ketana. So we'll say, maybe this whole thing is a machlokes tanoim. Rav Shimon Silber, Yachala Eved Lomar the Rabbi, B'shnei. So listen to this. We'll say an Eved. And I will say, I want to point out in all of these cases when we're talking about an Eved, Eved always means what? Eved always means Eved Kinani. Eved Kinani, right? So what happens? An Eved could say to his master during years of famine, "O Parnasani, either support me, O Tziana Lecheres, or free me." Right? Either support me or emancipate me. Support me or emancipate me. So I'll say that's Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. The Chum say, "Harashus biad Rabbo." No, ultimately again, the master has full control. The master doesn't have to support him, doesn't have to emancipate him. So what's going on over here? My love, what are they arguing about? So Damar Savar Yochel. So we'll say the Rabbanon hold. Ultimately again, that a master could say to his servants, "Work for me, and I'm not supporting you." And that's why even during a famine, right, the master will say, tough luck. Umar Savar Eino Yachol. Whereas Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says, no, a master doesn't have the ability to say to a servant, work for me, and I'm not going to support you. And that's why the servant has the right to demand either support me or emancipate me. V'tizbara. But I don't understand if that's the case. Hayu parnisani atzena v'cheirus, o parnisani otili maisi yodai beparnasasi mi boile. We'll say 1 second. According to Rabbi Eliezer, why does the servant, right? The servant offers an ultimatum. What's the ultimatum to the master? Either what? Either, right? Either, o parnasani, either support me or free me. No. It should be either what? Either support me or what? Allow me to have my own earnings, keep my own earnings, and support myself. Why is the choice between support and emancipation? The choice should either be, you support me, or what? Let me support myself. Which the Gemara says, this is a higher part of good. Furthermore, why is setting this up as a case of famine? Right? So, in other words, this same halacha would apply ultimately again, even if it wasn't a famine. So, what's the case? Here we go. The Amrlo, say ma'aseh adechel mzonasecha, ubesheni betzuras lo sipek. Wow. Watch this. Here's the case, right? Reuven owns an Eved Kanani. So what happens? Now, again, I will say, Reuven says to his servant, Reuven says to Eved, listen, you keep your earnings, go support yourself. What's the problem now, Abba? What's the problem? It's a famine. So now the problem is here that halacha l'maisa, the Eved cannot generate enough income in order to be able to support himself. Right? He's unable to generate enough income to support himself. So therefore, I will say again, so what do we do in this case? So watch this. Rabbi Shmuel says, O parnasani, O hotzi ani v'cherus. So Rabbi Shmuel says that halacha l'maisa, what is it? It's either support me, or go ahead and take me out, or emancipate me. Rabbi say, now get ready for this. Why? Ki hechi dechazu li inshi umeracha min alai. They say people will see me and have compassion upon me. Now, both say, now watch this. So let's set up this. This is actually absolutely fascinating. So both say, Rabbi Shmuel says like this. Here's the case. Reuven owns an Eved, right? Reuven owns his Eved. So what happens now? Reuven is said to his Eved, listen, you keep your earnings, and halacha l'maisa, support yourself. Okay? Now what happens? It's a famine. So now the Eved does not generate enough income during the famine to go ahead and support himself. So what do we do? So Rabbi Shmuel says that the Eved has the ability to go ahead and offer an ultimatum to the master, saying either support me or emancipate me. They will say, now what's the chap with emancipation? What's the chap with emancipation is, this way if I'm a free man, right, we'll say, what happens upon emancipation? What happens upon emancipation? He's Jewish. If he's Jewish, I will say, then what? People will have rachmanas on him to support the Jew who is in need. Right? So either support me or emancipate me. This way, if I'm Jewish, ultimately people will have compassion upon me. So listen to this. The Rabbanon Savi, this is incredible. The Rabbanon hold, Man de merachim abnei chori, abnei ha'eved nami rachume merachim. So the Rabbanon, on the other hand, hold that no. Anyone who has compassion on a Jew is going to have compassion upon an Eved as well. They will say, is this not absolutely amazing? I will say, compassion is a human trait. People have compassion or they don't have compassion. If a person has compassion ultimately, again, upon Jewish poor, he's going to have compassion upon non-Jewish poor as well. They will say, is it not such an incredible yisod? So the Rabbanon are saying that halacha l'maisa, even if the Adon does not go ahead and emancipate the Eved will still be able to get help. As well, say there's an incredible Musar Haskell in this, which is that sometimes, like we think we could have certain midos and turn them on sometimes and turn them off sometimes. Like, right, people who will say, like, I'll be honest when it comes to business dealings with Jews, but it's okay. With non-Jews, I can cut corners. So we'll say, word to the wise, don't do business with those people. Because if you're dishonest in some areas, you're probably going to be dishonest in all areas. Hey, you have people who are very nice to people on the outside, right? But to their family members, they treat them like garbage. So I will say, in general, those people don't have, there's going to be a breakdown in their midos with other people as well. You can't, essentially what the Gemara is saying over here is, to be a true Baal Midos, you have to be consistent throughout. Right? You have to be consistent throughout. If you have a midah that you turn on sometimes and turn off sometimes, then that's not a midah you really possess. So if you're going to be a Baal Chesed, you have to have that kind of midah both with your family members as well as with other people. You're going to be an honest person, you have to be honest with all kinds of people. You're going to be a Rachamon, you're going to be a compassionate individual. Ultimately, again, that sense of compassion has to go ahead and permeate all of your relationships as well. We'll say an incredible yisod. So Tashma, Damarav, Hamaktish de Abdo, what's another case over here? What happens if a person, so we'll say, okay, beautiful, we still haven't answered our question. Question still remains unanswered. Next, Hamaktish de Abdo, if a person consecrates the hand of his Eved, Ose Eved Lova ve'ochel, Ose ve'porea. So we'll say that Eved could go ahead and borrow and eat, and borrow and work. Or I should say borrow, sorry, let me read that differently. So a person consecrates the hands of his Eved. Remember, you could consecrate your Eved's hands, because remember, again, an Eved is property. So technically speaking, one could consecrate the hands of his Eved. So what does the Eved do? Osa Eved, Lova v'ochel, the Eved borrows and he eats. And then Oso Porea, then works and repays. So we'll see what that is in just a moment. Shma mina, Yachal harav lomar the Eved asemi ve'eni zancha. Now, obviously, what are we talking about over here? We're talking about that halacha l'maisa, the Eved is borrowing and repaying. So what must be the case over here? The case over here must be that the Adon is not supporting the Eved. So because he's not supporting the Eved, therefore halacha l'maisa, the Eved is kind of going at it on his own. So you see from here that a master can say to his Eved, work for me and I'm not supporting you. No, hakama. What's the case over here? B'ma'al lo mizonos, where the master is supporting the Eved. But one second, if the master is supporting the Eved, ihachi lemai, we'll say amud beis, lemai lova va'ochal. If that's the case, then ultimately, again, why is the master, or why is the Eved borrowing? Why is he borrowing? To which the Gemara says, la'adafa. Ultimately, again, for additional amounts. Ay v'lemole lehegdish, ad hashta sagi lechabalo ha'adafa, v'hashanami tiski lechabalo ha'adafa. I says the Gemara, if that's the case, why can't Hekdish say to this Eved, 1 second, up until now you were fine without the additional amounts, so now you don't need the additional amounts as well. To us, say, listen to this, Hekdish gufei nechale. Hekdish wants the Eved to have the additional amounts. Why? Ki hechid delishbach avdei. I will say, because this way, what happens? If ultimately, again, the Eved has more, then what I was saying? If the Eved has more, then halacha l'maisa, then ultimately he's stronger. Right? He's stronger. Right? And if he's stronger, then that is better. That is better for the Eved himself. Incredible. So the Gemara says, 1 second, Osa Porea. Now, Bosa, here's what's interesting. Bosa, listen to this problem. Bosa, if you're makdish the hands of your Eved, so what does the Gemara say? What could he do? He could borrow money, and then he works and he repays the debt, whatever he borrowed. Bosa, here's the problem. Anything that the Eved borrows, anything the Eved earns, so to speak, any work he does, I will say, who does that work belong to? Hekdish. Why? Because ultimately his hands are Hekdish. So how is he working and repaying? Anything he generates, by definition, belongs to Hekdish. To which the Gemara says, Kama Kadishle, any amount that he ultimately earns, or that he generates, ultimately, again, is going to be Hekdish. To which the Gemara says, Bepachos mishave pruta. Fascinating. We'll say, what is he doing? He's generating money, right? He generates earnings in increments of less than a pruta. We'll say it's fascinating. Hekdish only devolves on a pruta or more. It does not devolve on a pachos mishaver pruta. Says the Gemara. So therefore, what could the Eved do if he wants to go ahead and work and repay, but he doesn't want to run into the problem of Hekdish? What could he do? He could generate money in less than Shavah Pruta amounts. So it's going to take a while to repay that debt, right? But Lamaisa, it'll get repaid. Quite incredible. So this seems to be the case. Damarav, Hamakdish de Avdo, a person is makdish the hands of his Eved, Osa Eved, Oseva Ochel. Such an Eved has the ability to go ahead and work and eat. Di'ilo avda man palechle. If he does not work, how is he going to eat? Let's say, by the way, what a mantra in life, right? If you don't work, how are you going to eat? To which the Gemara says, "I'amrit bishlama hach b'ma'ala ve'ena yachol." So I'll say, if you frame this case as a case of where the Adon is supporting the Eved, and he's unable to say Aseimi ve'eni zancha v'ha b'she'eno ma'ala. And the second case is where he's not supporting him, Shapir. But if you say hach, the first case b'she'eno ma'ala v'yachol, ultimately is where he's not supporting him, and he could say Aseimi ve'eni zancha di'ila avda. If he doesn't work, man palechle. Who could support him? Man debay niflechay. So anyone who wants to can support him. Alav shmamina eno yachol shmamina. Rather, I will say, ultimately, again, what does it seem? It seems to be, the conclusion from the Gemara seems to be that halacha l'maisa, a master cannot say to his eved, "Aseimi ve'eni zancha." That a master can't say to his servant, "Work for me, and I'm not going to support you." Now, I will say, that's the end of the sugya. What is the conclusion? Right? So I will say, the Gemara seems to sound like, from the conclusion over here, that a master can't say to his servant, "Work for me, and I'm not going to support you." So we'll say, listen to this. The Rambam writes, get ready, here it is. I know you've been waiting for this the entire time. I felt the excitement building every moment. So we'll say, here it is. The Rambam writes, Hilchos Avodim, Perek Tes, Halacha Zayin, get ready for it. Yochel, Harav Lomar Li Avdo Kinani, Asei Imi Ve'eni Zancha. Rambam paskins that halacha l'maisa, a master can say to his eved, "Work for me, and I'm not going to support you." Ella yelech v'yishal psachim. Rather, he says to him, "Go and beg, v'yisparnis minat tzedakah, or go take tzedakah." We'll say, remember again. Here's the chab: an eved kinani is entitled to tzedakah, right? An eved kinani is entitled to tzedakah, which also means an eved kinani could take leket, shichacha, peah. Right? So therefore, again, the Adon has the right to say to his Eved. I will say, by the way, so Lavas has the right to say to his Eved, so Aseimi, work, I'm not supporting you. Go ahead and find support in tzedakah or other ways. Why? Because the mitzvah tzedakah, avail yourself of the different tzedakah outlets within the community and you're fine. So I will say, now this is true. He goes on, he says, Fine. The Rambam then qualifies this a little bit, but we don't have to worry about this. We'll say, now I just want to be clear. Should a person do this with his Aved? Right? No. We're talking about what the Adon is legally capable of doing, but halacha l'maisa does not mean that it should be done. I will say, but it is important to understand that this is a function. We'll say, what is this a function of? This is a function of the fact that an Aved is property. So as property, the master does not have an obligation of support. And since there are other forms of support available, what are the other forms of support available for the Aved? What are the other forms of support? Tzedakah. Now, both say, by the way, if you think about it, this doesn't make any sense for a person to do, right? Why doesn't it make any sense for a person to do? Your Aved is your workforce. Right? So it doesn't make any sense not to invest in your workforce, right? And now you're going to have a really distracted workforce if they don't know where their food is coming from. Okay, that might be true, but halacha l'maisa, it still works. So which I will say, what's fascinating, by the way, I think what is the Musar? There's a Musar Haskell and everything. So what is the Musar Haskell ultimately, again, of Asei mi ve'eni zancha, right? That a master can say to his Eved, "Work for me, and I'm not going to support you." So I will say, what it represents is the concept of a one-sided relationship. See, it's not the ideal, right? The ideal, ultimately, again, is a relationship of reciprocity, a two-sided relationship. But I will say, in life, there are one-sided relationships. There are relationships where one person is the taker and one person is the giver. Now, of course, those relationships are far from ideal, and those relationships are certainly not the things that ultimately, again, we should aspire to. But sometimes in life, they're necessary for a variety of different reasons. And again, that's the asei mi ve'eni zancha, the nature, the concept, the framework of a one-sided relationship. In other words, does it work? Now, when we say does it work, it happens, right? Does it work? No. Right? One-sided relationships ultimately, again, do not work for too long, but lamaisa, the concept ultimately exists. Let's go back there. So as it says as follows. Tashma, don't Rabbi Yochanan. Hakutea yad avdo shel chavero. So let's listen to this. Let's say I cut off the hand of the eved of my friend. Right? So again, let's say it's always interesting how you call these people your friends, right? Right? So let me say again, I go over to Reuben's eved, I cut off the eved's hand. Okay? It's not Reuben's hand, it's Eved's hand. Right? So what's the halacha? No saying shifto, the refu asal l'rabo. Also, we'll say, so remember again, when you damage someone, ultimately again, there are multiple forms of repayment. Right? So there's sheves. What's sheves? Sheves is lost wages. Lost wages. Ripui means medical bills. So halacha l'maisa, if I cut off the hand of my friend's eved, I give the lost wages and the cost of medical bills to the master. We'll come to Reuven, right? I went over to Reuven's eved, I cut off his hand, so I give the lost wages and ripui, the cost for medical bills, ultimately to Reuven. Va'osa eved nizo min tzedakah. And this eved ultimately, again, is sustained from charity. Shma mina, I got to halacha one line, 2 hours. Shma mina, yachal rav lomer le'eved asemi ve'eni zancha. So we'll say, what do you see from here? That halacha l'maisa, a master can say to his servant, go ahead and work for me, and I'm not supporting you. So we'll say again, why? Because ultimately, again, what is it when it says the eved is supported from tzedakah? So if the eved is supported from tzedakah, that means the master is not supporting his eved. Hacham asking, what's the case over here? The man lo mazonos. No, the case over here is where the master is supporting the eved. If the master is supporting the eved, ihachi amay nizon minat tzedakah. So then, why is the eved being supported from tzedakah? Lahad dafa. He's getting additional amounts from tzedakah. If that's the case, nizon, it shouldn't say nizon, misparnes mi bayale. Then I will say, ultimately, again, I will say, so nizon means like your ikr sustenance, right? Misparnes means additional amount. So it shouldn't say nizon, it should say misparnes. Elalav, shmamina yachol. Then I will say, what do you see from here? You see from here that Allah, a master does have the ability to say to his servant, work for me and I'm not going to support you, shmamina. So I'll say that is indeed the conclusion of the Gemara. I read the Rambam too early. Right? So I'll say that's the conclusion of the Gemara, that a master has the ability to say to his servant, work for me and I'm not going to support you. So I'll say that's the conclusion of the Gemara, and Allah is the conclusion of the Rambam as well. Incredible. So we'll say the Gemara just picks up on that last case. Amar Mara, let's just finish up. No saying shift of Ras al Rabo. So we'll say, so the Gemara said, that if I go over to Reuben's eved, I cut off the hand of Reuben's eved, I have to give lost wages and refuah and medical bills, ultimately again to Reuben, to the master. So shifta pshita. So I'll say again, lost wages. That's obvious. Right? That goes to Reuben, the master. Refuaso, it's shrichale. I will say medical bills is interesting. Why do I give? When I say medical bills, it's really the cost for medical treatment. So why does that go to Reuben? Refuaso didehi, right? Really about to say, who should get the money for medical treatment? Who should get that money? The Eved, right? Why should the Eved get it? Because the Eved needs it ultimately to what? To pay for his bills, right? To pay for healing. I will say this is fascinating. Lo tzricha, what's the case? Damdua lechamisha yomi. I will say, listen to this. Let's say again, after I cut off Reuben's Eved's hand, so I went to the doctor. The doctor said, okay, this is going to be 5 days of treatment. Right? 5 days of treatment to heal the wound, and then we're going to be good. Right? And what happens well? So listen to this. Va'avdu le'samach harifa v'itse b'tlasi yoma. We'll say, then what happened? They did a more aggressive treatment that was much more painful, but ultimately, again, it only took 3 days of treatment. So let's say, so just watch what happened over here. I went over to Reuben's Eved. I cut off his hand. Let's say, so now what happens? He goes to the doctor. Doctor says, okay, 5 days of treatment, $100 a day per treatment. Okay, I did the damage. I pay $500. Let's say, then it turns out that what happens? So the doctor says, you know what? We could give a more aggressive treatment, and I could heal the Eved in 3 days. I will say, but it's a much more painful treatment. So the Eved is healed in 3 days, right? Less time, but more pain. But I will say, at the end of less time, more pain, what are you left with? $200. Right? Why? Because remember again, I paid out $500 for medical bills. It turns out that, or medical treatment. Now, there's $200 left. So I will say, Ma'udatema, Sara Didehu. I'm going to have to say, who should get to keep that $200? Who should get the $200? The Eved. Why? Because the Maisa, how do we have that extra money in the pot? Why? Because of the tsar, because of the pain and suffering ultimately of the Eved. Kamash Shmuel, Rabbi say, who does it go to? Kamash Shmuel, ultimately it becomes the property of the Adon. Any additional amounts, Rabbi say, ultimately will always become the property of the Adon. Say, Rabbi say, Salach alamaisa, in this last case, I go ahead and I injure the Eved, so the Sheves, right, the lost wages go to the Adon. The Refuah, when we say that the Refuah goes to the Adon, what that means is if for some reason there's any leftover money from the funds allocated for the healing or for the treatment of the Eved, those additional funds ultimately go to the Adon. We also about say find that we finally got to the Sugya Halacha L'Maisa. Rambam says, Gemara says, Halacha L'Maisa, an Adon has the ability to say to his Eved, Asei mi ve'eni zancha, work for me and I'm not going to support you. We will stop over here for today. Shkoyach. Incredible. All right, Chevron Zoom. Have a great day, everyone. Wonderful to see everyone.